If you lived through the 90s, you definitely remember this hit. The beat that wouldn't let you sit still, and a smiling face that, with anthems like Saturday Night, Sexy Eyes, and Another Day, became one of the biggest symbols of Eurodance. But what if I told you that behind those contagious songs and the beautiful image of the Danish singer Sannie Carlson, there's a backstage full of secrets? The story of the Whigfield project reveals how a song that was initially a flop turned into a worldwide success and exposes the secret of the so-called hit factories, where the producers were the real artists, raising the controversial question that's echoed for over 30 years. Was the voice we heard really the same as the woman we saw on stage? In this video, we're going back to the dance floors of the 90s to uncover the full story behind this phenomenon. If you know other Eurodance hits and want to see them here on the channel, drop a comment. To understand Whigfield's story, we need to go back to Italy in the 90s. That's where we find the producers Larry Pignanoli and Davide Riva, the true architects behind the project. Pignanoli, in particular, was already a heavyweight, known as one of Italy's pop maestros. His label Off Limits became famous for creating countless Eurodance and electronic hits. Do you remember My Radio by JK Project and Satisfaction by Benny Benassi? Those were theirs.
Just hurt me till I can get my satisfaction.
Pignanoli and Riva had a system that defined Eurodance, a method that worked like an assembly line. First, they recorded the perfect track in the studio, and only then did they go searching for a pretty and charismatic face to front the project. A practice that, as we'll see later, stirred up a lot of controversy. And who was chosen as the face of Whigfield? A Danish woman named Sannie Carlson. She moved to Italy in 1991 with dreams of working in fashion, but she needed to pay the bills. By day, she was a model, and by night, a club promoter. That's where destiny stepped in. The producer Davide Riva met her and saw the potential. As she told The Guardian in an interview, one of the club DJs, Davide Riva, was part of a music production duo. He persuaded me to sing for them. She was exactly the kind of charismatic face they were looking for, someone with strong visual and commercial appeal, and choosing a Danish woman was no coincidence. In fact, it was an advantage. They knew that a European accent in English would be appealing to a much wider audience across the continent. When she joined the project, Sannie adopted the stage name Whigfield. In an interview with BBC, she said the name belonged to her former piano teacher, Emma Whigfield. But the truth is that even before they knew who would be the face of the project, Larry Pignanoli and Davide Riva had already created the hit that would take the world by storm, Saturday Night. The Whigfield journey could finally begin, and that's the story you're about to hear. Saturday Night was produced to succeed in nightclubs and on the radio. The producers followed a formula that couldn't go wrong, a dance beat that anyone could follow, a high-pitched, catchy keyboard sound, impossible to forget, and to top it off, super simple lyrics that were easy to memorize. The famous Dee Dee Na 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 at the beginning of the song started out as a joke. Pignanoli and Riva were testing some variations of the melody at the end of the track, and liked that part so much that they decided to turn it into the opening hook. With a formula like that, success was guaranteed, right? Wrong. When Saturday Night was first released in Italy in 1992, it was a complete flop. Radio stations wouldn't play it, record labels weren't interested, and the song went totally unnoticed. Things got so bad that even Sannie herself had given up. In interviews, she said she was convinced the project was off, and she was ready to abandon her musical career altogether. It looked like Whigfield's story was over before it had even begun. until Spain entered the picture. The song started getting heavy rotation thanks to DJs in tourist hotspots like Ibiza and Valencia. But what really made it hit the dance floors was a dance routine that none of them had planned. Sannie has said many times that she had nothing to do with creating the dance moves and was stunned when she performed in Madrid and saw a huge crowd doing the steps for the first time. The most famous story is that an aerobics instructor invented the routine for his beach classes in Spain. Tourists learned the dance, went back to their countries, and rushed to clubs asking for the song just so they could dance it with their friends. That created so much pressure that radio stations were forced to play it. In 1994, Saturday Night hit #1 in Spain, Germany, and the UK, where it sold more than 1 million copies and knocked Wet Wet Wet's Love Is All Around off the top spot after 15 weeks. In an interview with The Guardian, Sannie recalled the moment with humor. "I knocked Wet 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 off #1. Oh my God, I was the most hated woman in the UK. I even got hate mail." The following singles, Another Day and Think of You, followed the same Eurodance formula and broke into the UK top 10.
You know I love you, I always will. Another day with you, I need your body tonight.
But Whigfield also wanted to show a different side. Close to You, the project's first ballad, was an attempt to present a softer sound. While it didn't reach the heights of its predecessors, it still did well, hitting the top 20 in the UK, Ireland, and Spain. In 1996, another big international hit came, Sexy Eyes, which reached #1 in Australia and went platinum.
I just wanna be close to you. Sexy eyes, I'm gonna take it.
The first album, Whigfield, 1995, brought all these hits together. Critics were divided. The Guardian called it a soulless sound, while other magazines like Music Week and NME praised its pop energy, calling it the perfect summer party soundtrack. The second album, Whigfield 2, came out in 1997, at a time when Eurodance was already losing steam. Tracks like Gimme Gimme and Baby Boy still found success, especially in Australia. The album kept the pop sound but didn't have the same impact as the first one. Proof of that is the near absence of press reviews, showing that media interest had faded.
Give me the time of my life. Show me, forever, my baby boy. Hold me tight.
But while the spotlight from the mainstream press was fading, the eyes of more attentive fans were zooming in, focusing on a much deeper, more controversial question that had hovered over the project since the very beginning. Would you like to know what that question was? I'll tell you now. For years, a major controversy surrounded the Whigfield project, sparking endless fan debates. Did the Danish singer Sannie Carlson really sing the songs? The suspicion began around 1995. DJs, producers, and hardcore Eurodance fans who already knew the tricks of the industry started connecting the dots. They noticed the name of a certain Annerly Gordon in the songwriting credits and recognized her voice from other projects. But it was in the early 2000s that the theory exploded, thanks to the internet. On music forums, fans from around the world came together to investigate the case, comparing tracks and building an online dossier. The main theory that emerged from these discussions was that Annerly Gordon was the real voice of Whigfield. But who is she? Annerly was the secret weapon of the Off Limits label, a talented English singer and songwriter who, behind the scenes, helped shape the Eurodance sound. In 1993, she co-wrote the anthem The Rhythm of the Night for Corona, and at the same time started writing for Pignanoli and Riva's projects, including Whigfield and JK.
This is the rhythm of the night.
This supports the idea that such arrangements, one singer in the studio and another on stage, were common in the Italian dance music scene of the 90s. The most famous case was Corona itself, where the Brazilian Olga Maria de Souza was the image, but the voice came from studio singers like the Italian Giovanni Bersola. In fact, there's already a video on this case here on the channel, which I'll leave in the end screen or in the pinned comment. On the other hand, there are strong arguments against this theory. The main one is the accent. Many say that the voice in Whigfield's songs has a clear Scandinavian accent, different from Annerly's British accent. And there's a crucial detail. On Annerly's official website, where she lists the songs she wrote for Whigfield, Saturday Night is missing. That absence suggests that Sannie really did sing on the debut hit. The most likely conclusion is a mix of both. Sannie sang on the debut single, where Annerly, a trusted studio collaborator, contributed with vocals and compositions on other tracks. At the heart of it, this whole debate over who sang what reveals a clash of ideas. We're used to the traditional model, where the artist must be both author and performer. Eurodance, however, didn't care about that. The project mattered more than the individual, and the producers were the true artists. The lack of clarity around vocals wasn't seen as fraud, except in the Milli Vanilli case, but as part of the business model. But what happens to a Eurodance star when the craze for the genre starts to fade? In Sannie's case, her post-90s career became a story of evolution and creative control. Her albums released after the peak years show a series of changes. Whigfield 3, 2000, began exploring synth pop. The album 4, 2002, featured new producers, including the cousins Ali and Marco Benassi, who later became the famous Benassi brothers, bringing a more electro-pop sound. In 2012, the album W fully embraced modern dance pop. One of the most important changes was that Sannie stopped being just the face of the project and began taking creative control. She started working behind the scenes, writing and producing for other artists, including big names like the DJ Benny Benassi and the singers Ann Lee and In Grid. By the way, Ann Lee is Annerly Gordon's stage name. This shows that, regardless of the controversy, the two maintained a professional relationship in the industry. To explore other musical styles without the weight of the Whigfield name, Sannie smartly started using other aliases like Sannie and Nam. But in 2020, she returned as Whigfield with the single Suga, which mixed her classic sound with a modern twist and, surprisingly, hit #1 on the UK club charts. In 2018, Sannie took an important step to reconnect with her roots, competing in the Dansk Melody Grand Prix, Denmark's selection for the Eurovision Song Contest. Although her song Boys on Girls didn't win, the performance showed that she remains one of the most recognized pop artists in her country. And what about nowadays? At 55, Sannie is still active and remains one of the queens of 90s nostalgia festivals. She performs for huge crowds across Europe, sharing the stage with other icons of the era, such as Venga Boys and Dr. Alban. In interviews, she says she loves doing these concerts and feeling the energy of fans who grew up with her songs, showing the strong connections she built with her audience. Here on the channel, I'm running a series about the great acts of Eurodance. There's already a video about the Corona project, which was a big hit with the rhythm of the night, Hadaway with the mega hit What Is Love, and Technotronic with Pump Up the Jam. If you're interested in watching, check out the links in the pinned comment. And if you enjoyed today's content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. I'll be back next week with another great story from the world of music.